Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Great to see those people introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you very much. Please keep doing it. While you're doing that, while you continue saying hello, I'm going to introduce the speakers today. So my name is Hans. I'm director and founder at HdK. I am a male in my mid-50s. Short trimmed beard, brown eyes, olive skin, shaved head, and I'm wearing a blue checked shirt. Joining me today, and they'll introduce themselves later on, is Roz. She's a senior project manager here at HdK, and Yannick, he's a technical lead. And between them, they have a lot of experience reading briefs, acting on briefs, helping clients write briefs. So there's a lot of experience here today to bring to this conversation. We're going to last for about an hour, and we're going to cover some of these topics. So the first thing is, what is a good brief? Why is it important? Roz is going to talk about what you might want to include in your brief. How's your brief going to be used? And Yannick is going to pick up on the technical side of things, something that maybe intimidates some people. He's here to bust that myth. And we'll also leave some time for questions and answers, as we always do at the end. So thank you again for introducing yourself in the chat. I'm going to pick up on another interaction. I like to keep these webinars interactive. These are clearly not AI produced webinars, but they are live, and this is a great way of involving everyone here today. And I'm going to start off with a poll. And this will give us a chance as speakers to understand who's in the room, where you might be in terms of your journeys with brief writing, particular website brief writing. The first one is, what describes your current involvement with website briefing? And we've got 4 questions that are going to come up on the screen. So the first one is, I'm actively preparing a brief for a new or designed website. I expect to be more involved in briefing. Great to see those results coming in quickly. I'm not briefing right now, but want to improve how we do it. And I'm here mainly to learn and listen. So this will give us a sense of who else you're sharing this webinar with, and what people's experiences are, and what and where they are in this journey. So great. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So we'll see that most of you are actively preparing or involved with briefing for preparing a brief for later in the year. Some of you are here mainly to learn and listen, and that's great. We do, as you know, many of you will know, we do a webinar every month on a wide range of topics in digital marketing. So we're really glad that you're coming to this one as well. And then to follow up with that one, how will you be writing the brief? So and this one you can opt to various ones. So it doesn't just have to be one of those. So you can write it all by yourself, or maybe you're collaborating with a team. Maybe you've brought a consultant in to help you write it. Maybe you plan to find a template, or you've seen a template, or maybe some of you are already experimenting with how AI might help you write that. And then there's the obvious option for other. So where do you fit if you're writing a brief? How do you expect to generate that brief? And I think we're coming to the end of the results now, so I'm going to end the poll in just a few seconds. There's still some more choices being made. I'm going to end it now and share the results. Most of you, it seems, are going to write it as part of a team. There's quite a lot of you, surprisingly, how many of you are doing it on your own, and quite a few of you will use a template, and some of you will use AI. So whatever stage you are at, however you plan to write a brief, I want to take a moment to reflect on why it's good why it's important to have a good website brief. I think we probably can all agree that it is important, but it's useful sometimes to think about the reasons why that is, because I think that will help you when you're writing the brief, imagining who's going to be on the other side, who's going to be reading it, who's going to be acting upon it. Having these reasons will not only help us to write a good brief, but also might help you to review other people writing a brief before it's sent out to tender. So myself, I would answer this with a question. how many of us have suffered the consequences of a poor brief? And for that, I am taken back to my early days in arts marketing, when I worked in an organization, an opera company, and I was responsible for a photo shoot. It was my first photo shoot. Unfortunately, the results didn't go to plan. I think the producer was disappointed. The subject of the photo shoot, the opera singer, she was disappointed. And I certainly felt that what I had in my mind wasn't materializing in the contact sheets. And I think from that moment on, I really started to think about how briefs are written, how you convey the information, and what needs to go into a brief. And it's not just a website brief, it could be any marketing brief. Since then, there's been a clear pattern in my experience over the years. Projects that start with a good, strong brief tend to run more smoothly and deliver better results, whereas the ones that don't have a good brief can struggle from the outset. I want us to do 2 more exercises before we move on. I want you to think about what's the most common issue you're seeing when a brief isn't clear. So I want you to find the chat again, and I want you to maybe just one word, short phrase. What is it? What are the common issues that you see when a brief isn't clear? For me, from my experience that I mentioned, it might be that frustration I felt at the end, or it might have been something around disappointment. So we've got, Emma, thank you for saying confusion. Out of scope, extra cost, I think are really clear ones. A hard to navigate website. We've got client expectations are not met, missed deadlines, friction over budget. I see that it's interesting how consistent some of these experiences are and how avoidable many of them might be. So maybe none of these are dramatic failures, but they are small frictions that can build up, and a good brief will help to reduce. So thank you for those. A few more coming up: UX journeys, loss of sales, expectations not meeting the client's eyes, contradiction between comprehensive content, complications, things that could be simplified. So those are some of the things that people are writing in the chat box. Now I want to take the converse of that and what a good website brief can achieve. And a similar exercise, if you could put in the chat what goes well when a brief is clear. So for me, maybe it might be a smoother process, for example. And Bethan has said it speeds up the process. Direction and financial control, better conversion, better communication, absolutely. Good product at the end. So I think as these are coming in, you've got a sense of why it's important to write a good, clear website brief and what the benefits of doing that. And when you think about that, I hope that will help you write your website briefs as well. What's interesting is a lot of these are about how projects feel as well. It's not just about what's delivered. So a good brief, I suppose, can create confidence. It can create momentum and alignment. And we often think of a brief as a set of instructions, but it works very much as a compass. It doesn't necessarily dictate every step, but it helps to keep decisions in line and everyone working in the same direction.
Hi everyone, I'm Roz. I'm a senior project manager at HdK. I have brown hair, brown eyes. I've got a bright red lipstick on because it's such a grey day and a big fluffy jumper. And I'm going to talk to you about the key things to include in your brief and how we can use the brief throughout the project lifecycle. So I'm going to touch briefly on what we want to include. But just to say at the start, the brief is going to be reviewed by the full website team when an agency receives it. So it's really important to consider what each department might need information-wise to allow them to be as specific as possible about how they plan to achieve your project goals. So I'm going to start breaking these down into little sections, so it's not just one big screen of what to include. So what to include? Your project goals. This information is key. What does your website need to do in order to be considered a success? Are there achievements, metrics, goals? If it's possible to be specific about the type of goals you're trying to achieve, as digital agencies, we can think laterally about what you've said you need, and we might come up with some solutions which could surprise you to how to meet those goals. Sharing your current status and context can be really helpful. So knowing where you're at now would be great. For example, if you're doing your own SEO or got an SEO consultant involved, is there a content audit happening? Do you intend to include a tech stack consultant? Knowing those elements can be really helpful to give us the context and help us be specific about our ideas. Next one, the big one, budget. So I'd really recommend being honest and transparent about your budget, especially in today's situations. I can't remember the word. As digital agencies are really conscious about providing value for money and finding solutions which meet your requirements and your budget. But do bear in mind that if you're really undercosting for the project, you may end up in a position where the reality can't meet the vision of what you wanted. So in those situations, if you've got a tight budget, be upfront about it and amenable to your chosen agency being able to prioritize your requirements so you're starting with a great base for future expansion. Hans is going to touch on our recent experience with budgets now.
Thank you, Roz. Yes, we asked all the questions. We've done a similar webinar to this in the past. And certainly one of the questions that came up was, how much does a website cost? And we tried to answer that question as best as we could in that webinar. There's another slide, Yannick. We said a common answer to that question is, how long is a piece of string? I think that answer didn't really sit well with the person who was asking. They asked it a couple of times. So I've tried to think about how we can answer that question more comprehensively in this time. And I've tried 3 different approaches to answer that question. So I think it's a little bit like when you think about buying a house, you know, there's a wide range of prices that you could pay for a house, from small amounts to huge amounts. But the difference with buying a house, I think, is that there's a lot of data easily available, particularly these days online, about how much your neighbour's house costs, how much the house on the street you want to buy costs. We don't seem to have that data available to us when we are talking about website builds. So one of the things you can be doing is talking to your colleagues, your peers, people who have commissioned websites, who have been involved in website building previously, and you want to try and find people who have similar experiences to yours, similar size organizations and budgets, similar levels of complexities perhaps. So as one little exercise I'm going to do now, and just sort of get that sharing is caring kind of ethos going in the chat. If you have worked on a website project, if you have been involved in some way and you understand what the budgets are and you know the cost of a website, it'd be great for you just to put a figure in into the chat now. So it might be that you've spent 15,000 in the last couple of years, or it might be that you've spent 70,000 on a budget. Let's just get a sense of what those costs are that you are experiencing. And we see the first one that's come up is 70K. There's one who's gone around 35, 20, there's someone 160, there's 20 to 90 someone's put, 15 and 10 to 15, and 40 to 80. There's a lot of prices coming through on the chat there, and a really wide range of prices. So that's one place to start. You know, talk to your peers, find out, do your research through, you know, when you're at conferences and networking experiences, talking to people in the breaks. Another one you might lean towards these days is going on to something like ChatGPT, or some similar LLM like Gemini, and start to do your search like there. So I did that as an exercise. I put into a prompt into ChatGPT, and it went away trying to find PDFs and requests for proposals, analysing them, and it gave me a table. And on that table, it ranged from something as small as 5,000 for a website budget, up to somewhere in California where they had $1.5 million as their budget. So again, a really wide range. What was great about ChatGPT was able to give me some direction on what sort of prices what I might be thinking about at certain price levels, what I might expect. So there's another point of view that you might get. You've kindly come to our webinars here at HdK today, so I'm going to share my experience, I've worked in organizations for 10 years, so commissioning websites and website projects. And at HdK, we've built hundreds of websites over 20 years. So we have a sense of pricing and market, what the market will bear at the moment. And while it's very much our experience, and it will be different in different agencies and different website builders. This is just one experience. If you approached me at a networking experience and asked me in the break, so I would have said if your budget is around about 5 to 10,000, you're probably looking for an independent website builder who might use a platform like Wix or Squarespace, and might rely on templates to create something. You'll have a website probably more about information, less about interaction and functionality. When you're talking from 15,000 upwards, you're probably able to start speaking to an agency who will bring in a wide range of skills and disciplines into the project. It'll still be a very basic website, something that is maybe designed to look and feel like your brand and feel unique to you, and is very much still information led. When you're talking about 20 upwards, I think you can start to have more sort of part of the processes involved that look at audiences experience, user experience, thinking about the navigation, a little bit more templates to work with on your website. From 30 onwards, perhaps you're starting to think about integrations with other platforms, connecting to an API that agency has a lot of experience with. 50K, you're probably thinking much more audience-led designs and workshops around what they expect and customizing it to your different audiences. And upwards from 60, you're looking for more strategic leadership from your agency around that. And then from the hundreds upwards, they're much more complex projects, maybe needing a lot more stakeholder involvement, more interactions, more integrations as well. So that's just a sort of a very anecdotal experience from our point of view. I did one more thing, and I looked at all of the requests for proposals that we had in 2025. And again, that reflects very much what was coming up in the chat. The most common price last year that came our way, and that's self-filtering. It's people who are choosing maybe to look and to consider us for their website. A lot of them, the most common figure was about 50,000 for arts organisations. But that is not to say that an agency will only work in that range. Some agencies might want to work in higher ranges. Some might want a mixture to manage longer term projects with shorter term cash flow. So that will hopefully give you the most honest, transparent answer I can give you about pricing just now. So I hope that's helpful, Ross.
Thanks, Hans. I'm sure the person who asked that last year, if they were here this year, would have enjoyed that answer. So I'm going to dive back into some of the elements to include in your brief. So I'm now going to talk about user and audience information. If you can include who your audience is and also who you might want them to be in the future, if that's different, please do. A new website's not going to achieve its goals unless that audience is centered in the full process. Design inspiration. Now, this can be really helpful for us to understand the kind of website you want. This will obviously be fleshed out much more in further on in the process, but knowing your design likes, or if you have any very strong dislikes, can be really helpful, especially if you're looking for a more aesthetic look, got very strong branding or a very strong point of view about how the site needs to look. It means we can include considerations at the design stage from early on when we're looking at forecasting a project. Then competitor information. You know your organization and your market best. And even though we will research, look at competitors that we can find, you sharing that information can be really helpful. It could also be worth considering your dream competitors. So, people who you want to compete with, but you're not quite there yet, because that can provide a really interesting view to understand your organization's goals and aspirations. So the next set, functional requirements. Now, Yannick's going to do a bit more in depth on this shortly, but including what you require from a development perspective is crucial. But for me, a top line recommendation would be, you don't need to know how it will be built. You just need to know what you need your site to do. It's your agency's job to get you there. So don't overthink it. Content. Um, Content's so important to a website. So thinking about it at your briefing stage is really important. For example, let us know, are you planning for it to be rewritten? Is it going to be audited? And don't be afraid to say if you need help, because again, similarly to thinking about audiences, there's no point in building a beautiful new website if the content in there doesn't reflect your company, your brand, and doesn't speak to your audience. Timeline, this is another similar one to budget. Agencies want to provide you with a realistic expectation of what can be achieved. And to do that, you also need to be realistic about your own internal processes too. For example, do you have a director who you know will want to input on several key points, but you also know that there'll be lots of overseas conferences or won't be available? To make a timeline work in a project, it takes the agency and the organization to work together to run a project on time. So do think about anything which might be in your own hands within that project timeline. So we've had a look at the key elements of a brief and how they're used. Now I'm going to just briefly talk about when a brief is used. It might surprise you, it might not, that a brief is referenced throughout the project lifecycle, at least by me as a project manager. So I use a client's brief at every stage of a project to make sure that we're aligned with the client requirements every step of the way. So to start with the obvious, I'll be looking at it at the pre-pitch stage for costings and proposals. I'll be evaluating the brief from the point of view of, if we were to win this project, how could we fit it into our current schedule? And do I have enough information to confidently forecast and plan that project? Then, should we be successful, after the agency appointment, I'll use it at the kickoff to more solidly plan the delivery cadence and look at timelines and deliverables. Then, throughout the project lifecycle, I'll be looking at it on key approval stages. I'll drag out the brief to make sure that we're covering everything and cover any questions and question whether we've met everything which has been listed. Now, one that people might not think of, onboarding new team members. Now, this can be both organisation or agency side, but in a long-term project, it may be that staff members leave, you get a new director, and you have to get someone on board with a project mid-cycle. Starting with a really strong brief as something for them to look at can be a great foundation to give them the context, which the rest of the project is based on as that key starting point. So we've had a look through the brief from a project management perspective and how it's used in the life cycle of a project. And I'm going to hand over to Yannick, who will be going over possibly one of the bits that people find most overwhelming, the technical requirements of a brief.
Hi everyone, my name's Yannick. I'm technical lead at HdK here. I'm a white man with not much hair, a red shirt, and I've got bright blue eyes. So the technical part of the brief, and I always get really excited talking about this part. But before we kick off, I also wanted to start with a bit of a poll. But for this one, I wanted to put it into the chat. So if you can find the chat. How confident do you feel about writing the technical section of a brief? So one, not confident at all, or five, very confident. So if you find the chat and just start putting in the numbers, I'm seeing a lot of 1 to 3, a 4 there. It's interesting. There's a spread, but in general, it's kind of on the lower side. Great. So diving in, that gives you kind of a good idea of where we're kind of starting. Hopefully that number's higher by the end. But starting off, how do you approach the technical aspects of a brief? And I think I can relate, and when I speak with people, there can be a feeling of not wanting to get this part wrong, of not knowing the kind of landscape of what's going on, and basically not getting the right answer. But I really want to kind of echo something that Roz said earlier, which is that you don't need to know all the answers. You just need to say what it is that you want, and it's up to the agency to achieve that. So it's really just absolutely, you do not need to have all the answers. But when a technical person is looking, they're looking for some specific things. So what is it that a technical person is looking for? So they're looking for some, I suggest that when I'm looking at briefs, this is the kind of things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for the current landscape. So what are you currently working with? What are your expectations and what do you currently know? So what kind of maybe content management system are you working with? Are you working with something like Squarespace? It's a little bit more templated, or are you working with something more custom like WordPress or Craft? Have you got any ticketing systems? Who's using the website? Who's updating the website? How many changes? What's kind of going on at the moment? Do you have any objectives and expectations? So, are there any specific things that you're looking to achieve? So it could be things like as simple as we're looking for a way to manage our ticketing, or um, we would love for to have a way of mailing out. We don't currently have a way. Or we want to run user testing on our user journeys. Are there any specific objectives? It can also be something more specific. We're looking for a 25% increase in conversion, which, if you have that data, great. But if not, it's enough just to say we're looking for a better ticketing integration. That's enough as a starting point. And then, do you have any problems or ideal solutions? So we can't get our emails to talk with our ticketing system. They're separate. We would love if they were to talk together. Or we're currently having to manually put all of our ticketing into the website. Do you have any specific problems? But again, you can caveat it and say, ideally, we would love for these systems to talk to each other. And then the agency or whoever's briefing can say, well, either it's not possible or it is possible on a decent budget, or it's going to take a lot more time, a lot more budget. Is it something you want to do? It's okay just to put in there, but if you have any problems, those are really, really great, or specific places you want to go to. And then finally, any system choices. Have you already got systems that you're working with that we have to continue working with? So, for example, have you got a CRM system in play? Have you got something like HubSpot, Salesforce, Beacon? Are you working with something hard and fast that you have to keep working with? Is there a CMS system that you need to work with? Are there specific technologies that you have to work with? For whatever reason, are there any system choices that you have already made? So how do you begin to understand or how to kind of gather that information? And I'd suggest that you start just by writing what you know. I would just begin. I'm a big fan of drafting, just starting with something and filling in the details later. So just start with what you know. What do you currently have? What do you know? Just write down what you know. What do you like about it? And what don't you like about it? Just begin with that. What do you like? What do you know? What don't you like? And then finally, what do you want to do? Are there any objectives that you want to do with it? Are there any specific things that you want to go? Very simple flow. Just start with what you know. It's really important just to think about, what do you want to keep? What do you want to change? We like the way our website is easy to update. We can't update specific parts. We would love to. So in a more clear fashion, a writing flow would go something like this. Just start with a content management system. What content management system are you working with? WordPress, Craft, Drupal, Joomla? Do you not have one? Do you have something like Wix, Squarespace? Just start with that. Then go to, do you have any integrations or anything third party, let's say? So anything with ticketing, anything with memberships, anything with donation, any communication systems, Mailchimp, Digital, any shop. And I'd say that that is a good meet. That is enough to kind of say this is what's going on technically. Um, from there, you can kind of fill in the details, but that will give a technical assessment a good idea of what it is that needs to be built. From there, it kind of goes into more specifics, I would say. So then it's like looking at objectives. So do you have any expectations around server and hosting? And often these things become obvious when you're kind of in the context. So do you have, for server and hosting, do you need to have everything in the UK for data reasons? Or is it okay if it's in Europe, America? Does it need to be cloud hosting? Again, these things are more important. They're normally known when you're kind of in the organization, or come up as you begin to talk to people. Do you have any specifics around maintenance and support, ongoing, any analytics and tracking? I saw a question about SEO. Search engine optimization is what it stands for. Essentially, it's how easy it is to find Google and find your website. So do you have any specifics around that? Are you wanting to do any user testing? Do you have any specific security expectations? Are you going through, if you're doing e-commerce, do you have to have a requirement of PCI compliance that you're for a specific data reason that you have to go through certain processes? Accessibility, sustainability, do you have expectations or any extra needs in terms of serving a particular audience or a particular organizational goal? So to sum up, you don't need to know the answers, but what you do need to know is you need to give a good idea of what you want. To get there, just start with what you know and identify what you would like to do from there. And then finally, get support where you need. Sometimes it's just the most technical head in a department or the team that writes this part. But other times you can involve a third-party consultant. You can even approach an agency and just see if they will. We've had conversations with people where, because basically the better the brief, the better that we can deliver and we can help. But absolutely, just I'm a big fan of drafting. Just start with something and fill in the details as you go.
Thank you, Yannick, and thank you, Roz. That's it's really clear that a great brief is a combination of many vital parts working together to create this full picture. And at first, writing a brief can feel like a daunting task. It can feel like a mountain to climb or even a puzzle to solve. But remember, there's lots of resources out there to help you. You've got your colleagues, you've got stakeholders that can help you inform that. You have got there are consultants out there to help you write a brief. Talk to your agencies if you can, but talk to other peers as well. So there's lots of the AMA has good resources on writing website briefs as well. So also we have produced a 2-page handout with a checklist of things to include in a brief. That will be sent. You'll be sent a link to that when we send out an update that the recording of this is on the website. So you'll have access to that. It has a do's and don'ts checklist, and we'll share that in the follow-up email. So these are tools that you can use to create a great foundation for building a great brief for a future website. And if you've got any more questions after today, there's an email address. We love to hear from people. We can help answer any questions you have, and that email address is on the slide just there. So I can see there are already some questions coming in. So I'm going to open up with the first one, which I saw earlier on from Emma, which is what would an agency timeline look like very broadly? Are we talking weeks, months, years? And this is another question, a bit like the budget one. How long is a piece of string? So we can give you a sense of that. Does anyone want to jump in there, Roz or Yannick?
Yeah, I can jump in. I'd say if we're looking at the range which Hans was mentioning, so 15K and above for an agency produced website, we'd be looking at months. For the higher end ones, the 120K is probably looking at a year, depending on all the integrations if we're working with third parties to work out how things need to feed into various elements. I think one of the length, typically, I mean, each agency will have their own process, but here at HdK, we start with a discovery process, which I think clients could often be surprised that those are actually one of the lengthier phases of the websites where we're working out what needs to happen where. So I would say if we're looking at a 50K budget as a finger in the air, you'd be looking at the quickest 6 months and probably around 6 to 8 to 9 months more typically if there's a lot of content work to be done or integration work or lots of stakeholders. That's another one of the things which can make a budget, can make a timeline last a bit longer.
I was going to say the stakeholders. Often the timeline is driven by the client rather than by the agency. So we've had a project that has lasted 2 years, for example. We've had a couple of those projects, and that's very much about what else is happening at the same time as building the website. From an agency point of view, it can be a lot quicker than that. And of course, the other thing is, how is this going to change as AI gets included? And there's talk about very simple websites being auto-generated, so you wouldn't be working with an agency so much there. But there are sort of quicker versions of that as well. But I think ROS reflects what a typical agency at the moment is spending on building a website, especially one that isn't too sort of reliant on automations and templates and repeated sort of processes. So any other questions? I saw one, I think here. How do you budget and fundraise for ongoing costs and maintenance? So I think these days a lot of agencies do have support packages. So they would encourage you to not always sort of be reactive but to have a sort of a plan in place, so that you're doing regular updates and you're feeling confident that you've got the budget to make quick changes as and when they need it. And that can range from, I don't know what typical costs are. I know some costs, and it can range from a few £100 a month upwards, depending on the amount of support that you might need. So that's how you might want to budget for it. Fundraising, I'm not so clear on the fundraising side of things, but I think that hopefully gives you an indication from a budgeting point of view. It can be anything depending on the complexities of your website and your needs, from a very simple website being a few hundred a month perhaps, to thousands. So that's another wide range, I'm afraid, but that is the reality there. Does the timeline change if it's a refurb of a current website, like we already have one, so not entirely from scratch? And I think the answer is probably yes. Does anyone want to sort of jump in there with me?
Yeah, so I was actually typing out a message to you, Emma. But I think it depends on what you want to do. So if it's just a straight rebuild of the site that you have, just from like an old website to new technology, then that can be quicker. And it depends on what you want to do. Like if you want to add in audience work, any content work, any integration work, these are the things that normally extend the timeline. But often what we see is that rebuild is a really good opportunity to upgrade the website. So often it's worth it to kind of fundraise or put that time in place, so you can not just rebuild what's there, but improve what's there. Because the internet, it's essentially it's quite a young technology, but there's been huge leaps and bounds in what it can do, and also design patterns and what people would expect from a website. So it's often a good idea to invest that time to really, instead of just kind of like being with what the choices that were made when it was made previously, but to upgrade and use new technologies, and yeah, really invest that time now.
Thank you. And Kat sort of follows on that question with, if you have a website that isn't serving you anymore and there's a lot of elements you don't like, is it better to work through the fixes or just start again? And there aren't sort of defined answers for these. I think it's about where you are on that spectrum. I think they'll get a point when dealing with lots of fixes can start to get a bit frustrating, and actually starting from scratch could solve a lot of those problems for you. But then there are websites, we've certainly worked on websites that are up to 20 years old, in the sense that it's like that old, I've used this analogy before, it's like the old broom, that where you change the head one year and you change the handle another year. Is it the same broom at the end of that period? And we've certainly kept websites going for a long time. So it's really about what you feel is the right time to do this. And we often see that perfectly good websites are abandoned and started from scratch when maybe a new team come in place and they want to go in a new direction with it. So it can be both of those, and it's very much, I think, a personal decision there. What do you consider an old website? This is a good question, made us smile. So it's again, again, what is an old website? Again, I think it's very individual for every website. There are websites that have lasted a long period of time and feel fresh, simple design, clean design, timeless, and can feel fresh for a long time. Maybe that the technology does start to change. So it's a really difficult question, and again, it's very personal and very individual to each one. But if I was going to put something in there, I might say, and maybe each of us can answer that question with our own answers, but I would probably go in around about 7 years and above starts to feel really old for a website. The design fashion has changed enough, the technology has changed enough, and those sorts of problems are you start to see more problems maybe rearing its head if the maintenance and the support hasn't been consistent throughout. It's probably my sort of initial answer.
I'd agree with I'd say 5 to 7 years, but I find that when I'm saying the lower end, it's often client driven, wanting to have a new look and feel, have a new director in place, rather than the website stopping to work, to do with the direction of the organization more typically. Um, if you have a CMS like WordPress is what you're using, and you've got a support package in place, the website should be kept up to date and shouldn't be old in terms of falling over and rickety, but it's just a reflection of the organization's goals and direction at that time. Yannick?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Roz and Hans have said. That often like the core website of what you needed to do, the technology, if it's kept up to date and you've got the maintenance going on with it, then it can last for a really long time. But it's if your kind of business or organization goals have shifted or grown or evolved or refined, that's normally the thing that makes the website feel dated to the action, like actually what the kind of business is doing. But technology wise itself, like if you keep it up to date, you can get a lot of mileage out of a lot of technologies. But generally, there's lots of new things going on that you can take advantage of. So I would say like around the kind of 5 to 7 year mark is like a mature looking website. You can make it last longer, but often there's new things or new thing that sometimes can improve the kind of workflow, what's there in a drastic way. Rather than just kind of sticking on the old technology.
Thank you for that
There's
question.
another question, if I can, if I see it's a technical one, so might just jump straight to it. I saw Bethan, you said if you're also planning to change other tech solutions, such as email provider or CRM system, is it better to decide on those first or work with a web agency to find the best solutions? Um, I think what I would say is just it's better just to start. Um, I think if you can do it with an agency, great. If you can't, I wouldn't wait. The more time you can get going on things, the more answers you can have, the more the research you can do, the better. Then, yes, I would say that if you work with a web agency, then they're going to have domain knowledge. There may be specific CRM systems that they already know. They're going to know how things work because sometimes, like things work on the face of it, they work in a certain way, but then when you're working, like making it integration, the developer will see something that actually, like the API may behave in a way that makes it harder to do an integration. But essentially, I think that often getting that process going, at least having some of the work done, means that there's something to come to a conversation with a web agency. Just to say that if you also just don't have anything, that's also enough. But a beginning is often better than kind of waiting.
Right. Thank you for that, Yannick. And Kat, and this might be the last question. I hope I haven't missed any questions, but this is from Kat. Have you found that briefs, I like this, have you found that briefs have changed now that more people visit websites on their phones? So I can say that I've seen the requests in briefs. Don't think the briefs have necessarily changed, but what's included in a brief has sort of evolved over time, and there have been sort of clear sort of evolvements in what they want. Certainly, the making websites mobile friendly. I think I would say that's been around for more than a decade. Probably it's been in there. I think what we've seen in more recent years, probably have been the requests for CRM integrations. We've seen a lot more of that in the last few years. What we're starting to see now are people thinking about AI and how that might work with their website. So they definitely do change. The requirements have been evolving back over the last 20 years from my point of view. And we've seen different things, but certainly being mobile friendly, I think, has been around for a long time. Yeah, Yannick, Roz, anything to add to that? No, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
perfect answer. 10 out of 10.
Based on the question, thanks. This has been really useful. This is from Sophie. We only have around 3K as it stands to create a new website. Our current one is super out of date and buggy, so it's something we need to refresh as a priority. We'd be looking at having this created from a template. We'd be looking at having this created from a template on WordPress as it stands. Is this completely unrealistic as a budget? So I would say for an agency like us, we just wouldn't be able to do that, and it's not how we work, or we're sort of creating websites. We create microsites occasionally at that cost. We can't necessarily put them on. Yeah, so there's things around that. If the site is really simple, but it sounds like it might be more for you, Sophie. So I think you would probably be looking for an independent website builder to help you. And personally, I think 3K personally feels quite low for a website. But I know the technology is changing, and there are more sort of things you can do at that level that might help. But to me, it feels unrealistic. I don't know if Yannick, who gets involved in budgets, has any thoughts on that.
So it depends on how big your website is, what it's kind of doing. If it's a straight templated website, you might be able to get away with just finding a template out there and putting your content in. But I think when you're thinking about agency, the power of what an agency can give you is all the kind of knowledge and resources to upgrade a website and really bring all those kind of different elements to it. So I think I echo what Hans is saying. You're probably looking for something more independent, and they may be able to have this kind of like templated view. Normally, when you're kind of approaching an agency, the reason is that you want that kind of discovery period, design period to create something very custom.
And I think certainly at that budget, even if you are working with someone, you're going to have to do a lot of the legwork as well, putting in content, and the templates are going to be, if they're going to be very loose in the sense of, you know, it's sort of constraining the design to fit a brand. I think that you're going to it's not going to be so sort of flexible for you in some ways. So I think it's unrealistic. I think it's going to be a challenge, but technology is always changing, and there might be solutions out there that help you. If anyone has any suggestions on that for Sophie, on how she can make the most of that budget, please, do feel free to add that in the chat. I think then that is all of the questions. So I just want to say thank you again for coming along to our session today. We've really enjoyed sharing with you our experience around writing briefs. We hope there's some stuff there that you can take away and help when you're creating a brief. And just to say thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you in some of our future webinars. Thank you.